There we go. We're recording now. So just to let you know the kind of plan we've got for these evenings. The first one was a kind of get us going, really. And the idea is to follow some of the steps that's involved with starting something from scratch through to the point when it becomes self-sustaining and bringing transformation on its own. And each of the weeks we'll look at a different aspect of that. And so last week we were concentrating on the vision bit, the what lies behind it, the passion in your heart, that thing that won't go away, that you just know you need to do something about, but haven't actually managed to work out what to do with yet. And this week we go on to look at purpose and things like unfolding story. Next week we look at the values that we attach to what we do. And then we'll be looking at how you implement that and bring that about in some ways in your environment, in your community, or wherever you are. And so what we'll be doing tonight is building on that first session. And again, we'll be trying to couple it back and looking at how we see this being reflected in Jesus establishing the kingdom of God here. That great vision he had to bring about the kingdom and all the facets of the kingdom of God, not only in his day, but continuing through our day and on into the future, so that we can see that transformation occurring as the kingdom becomes more and more present. And so we'll be looking at that, seeing how that works. But I want to warn you right away, because this can be hard work. And what you'll find is that as you start to become engaged with thinking in ways that are a bit different, you might find yourself with people around you that don't really get it. And actually you start making them feel uncomfortable. So I just warn you, because that's one of the challenges. If you get something that becomes a passion, a fire in your heart, you will start, well, as we said, challenging the status quo when we spoke last week. And that will bring things about that actually might be different, might be challenging, might be concerning for some people, and may even be disturbing for you. So watch out for that. And part of the benefit we've got by being a group together is we can share some of this thing with each other. So last week we looked at vision. And I'd like to start off, as we did last week, by giving you an opportunity to share some things together right at the start. And I'd be really pleased if you'd be able to share with each other something of your experience of thinking through what your vision and passion was and what you'd like to do with it. You know, what is it? Can I capture it? And if you haven't caught it, how you might like to discuss with somebody else, maybe in your group, in your breakout group, how you might support them and help them to shape that, to do something with it. Because we don't want to turn those fires out. We want to make it so that they've got something to burn with and to go on from here. And so I'm going to set up some breakout rooms. I hope that's okay for everybody to do that. Are you happy with that? And I'm going to, I'm sure some of you loved the breakout groups you were with last week. And some of you may think, oh, it'd be quite nice to have a different one. So to give you all the benefit of that, I'm going to give you some different breakout groups this week so that we can share different thoughts and different thoughts with each other as we come together. So I'm hopefully going to be able to get this to work, and it's all going to happen seamlessly and wonderfully. And let me see. Back, everybody. So how did you find that conversation? Was did you find so I'll be keen to hear from one or two of the groups the kind of things you were finding either good, easy, challenging, exciting, hard in what you shared with each other. Would somebody like to just tell us something that they
I'll go first, Paul, because we're room one, and just to say, you didn't give us enough time.
Yeah.
All three of us were very enthusiastic about what we'd been looking at during the week. So
Wow.
So that's a real positive. All coming at sort of we're all coming at it from 3 different angles, but basically looking at 3 different ways of glorifying the Lord, and that's great. That's after 1 week, so
yeah.
thank you.
Cool. Well, that's really good. And did you each have multiple things, or did you just have one thing each?
I think it's fair to say there were multiple strands, but one central theme to each of the 3 of the ways we were looking. I don't know if the others agree, but that's what I saw.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's really good. Anybody else from another group got some things they'd like to share?
Paul has got an absolutely excellent, huge project.
Thank you, James.
Right.
And
Why doesn't that surprise
I'm just getting all the financiers who are on this to be swept along by your enthusiasm and your project.
Cool.
I've been working on a vision that God put in my heart, and it's about diversity and inclusion. Although I'm a lawyer, I've been writing for some time children's books, but what he's put in my heart now, to do with the fact that there aren't enough diverse and inclusive books.
Okay. So Paula, can I pause you for a second, because we're not sharing all of our visions at the moment.
That's not what you wanted to do.
We're sharing how easy it was for us to find them and have something, and whether we could work out what it was, or whether we were struggling with it.
Okay, it was easy for me to.
I think we can say that you probably got something.
Yeah, it was easy. But to be fair, I had it before I joined this group.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's okay. You're allowed to have it already. And what we're going to try to do is, if you've got it already, brilliant. The question is how can we help you do something with it, and how you can do that actually with a God context attached to it. That's the key thing. Is not only can we start, but we can do it, and it can run in tune with kingdom purposes. And what's more, we can use and engage with God to help refine and sharpen whatever it is that we're doing. So those are the other dimensions that often people don't get with this. Anybody else, any other group got something where they noticed God putting something in their hearts, things in their minds, something that was exciting, or that they found difficult? Was there a group where they found things difficult? No, there must be another group with some things going on.
I think in our group, it was clear that we were in different places. So we had at least one person that had a fairly clear vision of what they wanted. Another person that was sort of trying to get a sense of what the vision could be. And in my case, had a vision but needs to check it out because it didn't quite work last time. So yeah, in different places.
Cool, great, good stuff. Any other group?
The two of us who had time to speak found ourselves that our visions were being driven by what we saw around us and the situations that we're in, and we basically, the spirit was driving us to get behind something.
Great, well, that's really good. It looks like I need to give you guys everybody a bit more time next time, so apologies for that. It's really hard, isn't it? Because the worst thing about Zoom is that if you're in a room doing this, you can tell by the level of activity going on whether people need more time or not. With Zoom, it's really hard because it just disappears. So you kind of have to just say, well, okay, we're going to go with it. So anything else? Anybody else?
Just to add to what Richard said, I was in the same group. What I felt, and I think Richard was in a similar position, you get a vision and it has to ferment for quite a long time. You're not quite sure the timing of it. And, Richard came up with a thing, he got a vision basically for doing something in the community, just leave it at that. And he didn't say much more anyway. And so is mine. Well, I'm sort of saying, actually, what Richard has and what I carry could actually be sort of about here, maybe here, just starting to mesh. And it's difficult to work out the timing sometimes, but you've got to journey it. Yeah. Timing is a key issue. Timing is the thing that usually goes wrong.
because quite often, I mean, in everything that I've been involved in, well, most things I've been involved in, people have said you started too early. And quite often I have. But on the other hand, sometimes you need to start early enough so that there's enough things in place so that when the moment comes, it's ready to go. So you know that thing about the Kairos moment that's often talked about in Christian service,
yes.
The moment when things seem to be right. And actually, that's about having our prophetic, our spiritual antenna ready to notice that. And sometimes you have this sense of it not being right, but now is the moment. But actually, it might be the moment to start something. It may not be the moment that the world is ready for it. So do you remember notice they're two different things. Quite often there's a formative time, there's a preparation time, there's a working it up time, and then there's a time to launch it. And so you need to be attentive to both. So that's good. Anything else that you're spotting, anybody?
One of the things that I've struggled with is that people don't always understand that you're acting in faith. And sometimes what you say and do may look ridiculous. And trying to not seem like you're crazy at times like that is not always easy. And there's a tendency to want to keep it to yourself, but you can't. In my case, I need other people to invest in what I'm doing. But that's one of the beauties of it, because that's how I'm going to show that I'm a Christian and believe that what I'm doing is the right thing to do. But the figures and the projections and everything that I'm doing needs to factually make sense to a businessman. Otherwise, they're not going to speak to me.
Okay. Yeah. So don't worry about it being crazy, Paula. That's the first thing I need to say. And don't worry about it making sense, because usually it doesn't. And actually what we're going to be talking about tonight is how it doesn't make sense. And how do you cope with it not making sense?
Yeah.
Because the key thing about it is that no, this is really the difference between actually going on and doing something that's risky, that's entrepreneurial, is that to the people around you, especially the people that know you well, and especially the people who are in our church communities who are used to keeping things in good shape, it won't make sense. What happens is people don't invest. Well, so people don't invest in something that's going to make things pretty much the same as it was, only slightly better. What they invest in is something that's aspirational, that could transform things, that makes it extraordinarily better. And the key thing about it is that carries with it risk, and it may not work. But that's why people invest. They invest in the thing that they catch in people. They invest in the thing that they think is bonkers and can go for it. And so there's this crazy stuff. It's just look at Jesus's life. I mean, before we move on to do other things, do you remember early on in Mark's gospel, particularly, there's two occasions where Jesus is going around doing kingdom of God stuff, like healing the sick and casting out demons and saying the kingdom of God is here now. Get behind it, change your lives. And what do his family and friends do? They go and find him and they say, come on, Jesus, you're mad. Come home with us. You're being a bit bonkers. We can't cope with it. And actually, you've only got to look. There's two occasions. It was one particular occasion in Mark where his mother and brothers turn up and say to him, he's gone a bit bonkers. We'll take him home. He'll be all right soon. Poor lad. And the other thing is, you just look at crazy things about this, is that what about the demoniac? You know, they just went across the sea to the other side. And there's this naked bonkers guy in the tombs who comes up, can't help himself, who's called Legion because he's got so many demons. And he comes and meets Jesus. And Jesus has a conversation with them and sends the demons out. And as you know the story, they'll get in the pigs and they run off the cliff and all that kind of stuff. And this guy is completely transformed. You know, talk about the kingdom of heaven has come, changed the way you think. Well, you know, this is changing everything very dramatically. And everybody around him knew who he was, but they were terrified of him. And of course, this guy wants to get in the boat and go back with Jesus. And Jesus says, no, don't do that. Go off and tell everybody about what's happened. Now, how many of us would have done that in our church? We'd have probably said, this guy has issues. He probably needs a training course. He certainly needs alpha before he can do anything. The last thing we wanted to do is go and be a missionary. I mean, goodness, he's a naked guy in the tombs. And by the way, he's a Gentile as well. They aren't supposed to get this either. And so Jesus sent him off. And then sometimes later, Jesus comes back to the same area again, and 4,000 people go and listen to him on the hillside, just because the crazy guy has gone along and just said, look, I've got clothes on now and it's okay. And I'm sorry about your pigs.
That's definitely our church strategy, Paul, to rely on a crazy guy.
So kind of like, who's Jesus investing in at that moment? I mean, he has this colossal kingdom message, which is the kingdom of God has come.
Mm-hmm.
And he hasn't sent his disciples out on their own, but he has sent the bonkers guys being nude in the tombs.
I'd share something on that, Paul, because
Go on.
one of the images that we feel God has given us in terms of our vision for the way forward, not what the vision is
just made me overwhelmed that the vision is a naked guy in the tombs.
yeah, that was it. No. Surfing the wave, and when we have a vision which is our ideas, it's not really a vision, it's just our ideas, and it's tough and it's hard work, but it seems very sensible. But sometimes God's ideas don't seem very sensible. You know, surfing a wave can be quite dangerous. You don't get to control the wave, you don't get to control the destiny, but it's a lot easier than swimming to shore.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is, you're right. I mean, my present business, just to connect with Brian on this, is a company that when we first started the technology, every other technologist I knew around us said that won't work. You will not get that technology to work. And that was basically, the whole business is actually based upon a vision from God about how to make this technology work. But everybody said it won't work. All the engineers, all the techie people that we met just said, nah, won't work. But very fortunately, lots of people invested in it, large amounts of money, and they all knew that it was a God story that underpinned it. But we'll come back to that some other time. What's crucial here, though, is that it's how do you get to that moment where you can say, let's release this, let's let bits of it go, let's let some of this multiply, and how do we work out what that's going to be to get this started? And I'm going to share a screen with you now, if I may, and hopefully this will get us going, and hopefully you'll all be able to see it. And I'm going to remind us of our vision that we had previously, and in that we've also remember the I have a dream bit. And one of the things that strikes me about this is that do Christians have dreams that are from God?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, how limiting is that? It really should be for everyone, because in Acts 2 it says, in the last days God says, I will pour out my spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy, and your young men would see visions, and your old men would dream dreams. So the expectation is that we'd be having those visions and dreams, but what about? It doesn't tell you what they're going to be about. But one thing you can get from the context of it is it's going to be about establishing the kingdom of God. So if you're feeling something that's churning you up, Well, it's probable that it could have some substance that's coming directly from that heavenly dream. And actually, there's a great phrase that's often used when you're building something new like this is, I have a BHAG. I have a big, hairy, audacious goal. I have something so extraordinary that it just seems kind of like, oh my goodness, that's big and it's scary. And what am I going to do with it? And actually, those big, hairy, audacious goals are built normally and held up by, and I just use this illustration of a three-legged stool. There's all kinds of ways you can describe this. And this is just something that I found useful. It doesn't mean to say there's lots of other ways, but it's got three components, which is vision, which we spoke about last week, values that we're going to do next week, and purpose, which is our focus for today, which is what is our purpose? What do we do with that? Well, purpose has a key characteristic because it gives you an idea of where to start. And it's very easy to have a big, hairy, audacious goal that looks like it's right up on the mountainside and it's all bright and sunny and it's lovely and you're really happy to be there. And everything, all is right with the world and it's wonderful. And you can see that off in the future. But usually where you have to head to begin with is down some muddy track in the fog when it doesn't feel quite so good and you're kind of wondering what you're about and it doesn't quite work and your boots don't fit properly and it's feeling uncomfortable. The question is what is that first thing you're aiming to do? That becomes the starting point. It isn't the BHAG, it isn't your ultimate vision, but it's what you're going to do now. And it's really important to be aware of this is the first step. It is not the goal, but it's where we begin. And I mean, I know there's lots of great illustrations. I mean, one that came to mind when I was thinking of this was I remember years ago, I was up on a couple of mountains in Wales called the Rhinogs. And I was up on Rhinog 4, which is the highest one of the little group. And when I was up there, there was this bunch of obviously soldiers who were being trained, came tramping up. We were very pleased to have got to the top and they got loads of gear on. And they were looking around and I could overhear them. And one of them noticed the other mountain that was a bit of a distance away, that was slightly lower, that had a big lake on top of it. And he said, I told you that was the one. Because that was where they were meant to camp overnight. And that was the one that had the water supply. And so they ended up having to tramp off down the mountain again and climb this other one to get to where they were going. But the thing was, is that became their kind of short-term purpose. Their short-term purpose was to get this training course completed, where they were actually going to be building the way, understanding how a team works, understanding how they were going to be behave as a bunch of soldiers, how they were going to build their fitness and competences and capability up. Their goal at the moment was to complete the training course, to become the soldier. That was their current purpose. Their goal was still to, if you like, I don't know, defend the British Empire or whatever it is, defend, be a peacekeeper. Look after, see the world. I don't know what it was that they had in their hearts, but that wasn't their goal. Their goal was to get to the ultimate purpose. And the question is what are we looking for from that? And I thought it would be quite useful if I had a look at a church goal and to see how that worked out in purpose. And one that I found quite interesting was there's a campaign that's being run by HTB. And I know you all know HTB because that's where the Alpha course came from. And Holy Trinity has planted quite a lot of churches around the country. And during this pandemic, they started a campaign called Love Thy Neighbor. And it didn't exist before. And I don't think they really knew what this vision was. But they just picked up on this term, love thy neighbor, and they started actually providing food parcels to those that were locked in. And they also found that those that were locked in were often lonely, so that they were beginning to show love and show kind of community by connecting with people who were locked in. And what's happened is that it's now expanded to become a campaign that's gone beyond all of this, even though they're delivering millions of food parcels now across all kinds of churches around the country, is actually becoming something where it's embodying more and more kingdom attributes in the love they're giving to the community. And the great thing about it is love thy neighbor is a great vision phrase, because it's kind of all encompassing. It's a very crisp way of saying, can we get behind this? Yes, it's love thy neighbor. What does it mean? Well, it kind of, well, right now it means giving them some food. It's making it so that neighbors don't die. It's making it so that neighbors have the basics of life. What might it become? Well, I don't know. But you can kind of see the vision there connecting with it. And the Vineyard Church is interesting in this, because they're actually really good at encapsulating vision, and they have their vision statement, which is they summarize their vision as extending God's kingdom together everywhere in every way. But what they do then is that they have what they call their emphases that they have for periods of time. And this is effectively like their purpose for now. And so their focus for the next year or so is these 5 things: health and growth, planting more churches, kingdom impact, developing tomorrow's leaders, and worship. I mean, that's quite a lot. And you know, it's quite big, but you can kind of see how what they're doing is they're saying, that's our vision. And these are the things we need to do to articulate that right now. Some of them are building our competencies to be able to deliver it, and some of them are actually effectively delivering it right now through the kingdom impact or the planting the churches. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then there's one big word of caution with all of this, is that once you start to have got your first stage of, so you know, remember we used that little illustration, and I'll just drop back now and seeing if I can. I'll stop sharing now and come back and join everybody. And just to say, do you remember we had that little idea of doing the you know, imagining your passion was for the lonely, and you were, you know, you had this vision that somehow there will be no more loneliness. In other words, everybody would feel as though they had a friend. So what could your short-term purpose be in relationship to that? What could your initial purpose be?
That your immediate neighbours are not lonely, have community.
Yeah, I mean, you could start with the person next door.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it could be that basic. It could just be that you look down your road and just notice that there's somebody living on their own and think, okay, well, start there. That's my purpose. Could it be a bit bigger than that? Or, you know, would you extend it much beyond that?
You could say your street.
You could say your street. Yeah. Anybody else got any other thoughts around all that?
I think the problem, well, I see it, that the church has got very much involved with a social gospel, but that is where it stops. They never get round to properly introducing people to Jesus and making disciples.
Right, okay. So the thing is, what you're talking about there is a vision that we'd extend. So you'd say, we are aiming to make disciples, or we're going to enable people to come into the kingdom themselves, starting with by making it so that nobody feels lonely. So that's going to be the evidence of our love for the community. That will be the stepping stone for them coming to know Jesus. Does that make sense? So in your case, David, there, your purpose is help people to feel valued in their community as a first step to becoming members of the kingdom with us by knowing Jesus for themselves.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So what you've got is these two things coming together. Now, did you notice what David said there?
Makes sense.
Yeah. But did you also notice that he said, the trouble is we do the first bit, then what happens?
Yeah, we lose sight of the vision. We spend so much time involved in the initial purpose that we don't actually move on to the vision, to fulfill the vision.
Exactly. What we do is we get stuck. And because what happens is that once we've got somewhere, we then have a tendency to say, hey, that was good, didn't we do well? And lots of other people in our local church or our community will say, well done, that's really cool, well done. And that kind of, sorry, go on, Hugh.
But there's also a danger that if you're following, so picking up David's point, if you're following your goal of befriending lonely people, and you're not discerning in who those people are, by which I mean listening to God, what you end up with is reaching those people who just want a friend because they're lonely,
right? But
not reaching those people who want the Saviour. Now they may not know they want the Saviour, but where God is saying that's the person I'm working in.
Yeah, and haven't you noticed it? I mean, I notice this quite regularly. Is that what I'm saying? Often say to people, yes, we'll happily pray for the sick. And then what happens is somebody says to you, oh, please will you pray for my next door neighbour because they're not very well. Yes, okay, I'm happy to pray for your next door neighbour, but have you prayed for them? Yes, but I'm not going to tell them I'm praying for them. Why not? Where's notice the key word that's missing in these kind of things is the risk word. That was the entrepreneurial bit. That's the bit that's missing. There's that great phrase, which is faith is spelled R-A-S-K. But we don't think of it in these terms quite often. So notice the thing about getting stuck. Who tells you when you're stuck? I'm looking around at a bunch of people, some people I know quite well here, whose job it is to tell you when you've got stuck.
If you're listening to the Spirit should tell you that you're getting stuck.
Right, the Holy Spirit can tell you you're getting stuck. Yeah. And what sort of people have that job in the whole of the Christian lifespan of church and the whole of the Bible?
The prophets.
The prophets.
Yeah.
The prophets, that's why everybody hates them.
Yeah.
That's why they're the irritating rat bags who go and mess everything up, because you've just got to that place where you're feeling really satisfied that everything's okay and it's all right and it's all working and it's all great, isn't it? And nobody down our road is lonely anymore. And then the prophet turns up and says, yeah, but how many of them know Jesus? Well, none of them.
If what you're saying can be justified entirely in worldly terms, if what you're doing rather can be justified entirely in worldly terms, like for example, you're doing a great social gospel job, you're healing the sick, you're giving the money to the poor, you're doing lots of things that will get you lots of applause from the world, you can be pretty sure that you're not actually following the Spirit, because everything you do is basically defined by the world.
Yeah,
terms.
Absolutely. So the key thing here is to remember that the future does not arrive fully formed. The future we may have in our minds, and we may have a terrific vision of it, and hurrah, have that vision. But it ain't there yet. But don't let it out of sight. And everything you do needs a vision keeper, because otherwise you'll lose sight of where you're really going. And the thing about it is that if you've got multiple choices of things you're wanting to do, or you're anticipating doing, it's great, but you'll find that some of them are actually, so your big vision, some of them are actually really a short-term purpose on the way to a vision. So that's okay, but don't think of it as a vision. And if something that looks as though it might be a vision is actually just something that makes your insides completely quake, and you think, I just really can't get that, then probably it's not really a Holy Spirit empowered thing. It's just something that you're sensing God's heart for that. But he hasn't equipped you with the tools to do it. Look for the thing that is absolutely on your heart, that you feel as though it's a stretch beyond you, but nevertheless, you feel as though you've got a starting point to do something about it. Because the chances are God's giving you the bit that's enough to get going. And so what we have is we have this thing about, okay, we've got an idea, we've got some ideas about it. And the key thing about it is to say, well, how do you begin? And the answer is just start. I said it quite loud, quietly, because most of us don't. What we do is we wait, because just starting is usually a bit too scary, because we don't feel as though we're quite well enough equipped. We haven't got the tools. And by the way, everybody I've talked to has said it won't work anyway. I mean, it was quite interesting that Jesus was a little bit reluctant when Mary said at that wedding, just do what he tells you. And how did Jesus's ministry begin? He just started. He said, go and fill those things up with water and go and give it something to the master of ceremonies. That was quite risky. And it's quite interesting to see how he just began by somebody just saying, go and get on with it. And it's almost as though he wasn't sure whether this was the Kairos moment to begin, but he just had to go. So the interesting thing about this is that the purpose, do you notice how when we started sharing it with each other, notice how it was helped by sharing it with each other in a very simple way. What happened was you started saying, yes, but actually is that, so we said we could do this because it'd be really good because the people down our street won't be lonely anymore. And then David was saying, well, what about them getting to know God? And then we had to work it out and see what was going on from there. And what we got an interpretation of the vision, but it was a rather imprecise way. And that's what's often described as vision with imprecision. And it was something that was brilliantly used. I won't go into it all now. I'll come back to that in a second. So if we're going to do this, did you notice the difference between trying to just organize something and bringing in a leadership role here? How this is going to be able to get an element of leadership in it. So what I'd like you to do right now is I'd like you to just think about the difference between managers and leaders. And see if you can just think about that for a moment. And it'd be really great if we can have a little conversation about how we get things going and think about leadership. So what characterizes a leader?
People are following them.
Yes, people are following them. They're not just being organized. Yes, you know the difference between a leader. if you if you turn around and notice people following you, then you're a leader. If you turn around and there's nobody there, you're simply going for a walk.
Yeah.
The standard definition of leadership, which I learned a few years ago, is that leadership is the ability to influence the behavior of groups of people.
Okay, influence is an interesting word. I don't think that's I think it's only part of it.
Yeah.
Anything else?
They usually have charisma.
Mm-hmm.
Quite often they have charisma, but not necessarily, strangely enough.
I think there's a, sorry, Paul.
Go on.
I think there's a difference between how the secular world sees leadership, which is if I get an idea, I either influence you with my charismatic nature, which clearly I have, or because I have a job contract with you. Whereas a spiritual leader gets a vision from God and enables other people to catch that same vision from God.
Okay, I'd like to hang on to that though. It's having a vision, enabling other people to catch it. Yeah. That is the same across the whole lot.
Very simple. But what I mean is, it's not me that persuades them; it's getting them in a position where they can hear God themselves.
Okay, so what you're talking about is the mechanism by which the followers connect.
Yes,
there can be something seen in that person, and I get that. But there's a number of characteristics that are very interestingly very similar across both areas.
I think they like their agenda setting, in the sense that they're able to convince others to follow them somehow or other, because they have clear agendas. So
they've got an agenda. They've got a kind of direction. They know where they're going. Yes, even if they don't know quite how to get there, they know where they're going. Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
There's an element of setting an example. Sorry, John. There's an element of setting an example, isn't there, where and sort of projecting. So. For example, Paul, I could imagine you're a leader because you speak very enthusiastically about things, and it's quite easy to listen to you and feel enthusiasm. You're setting an example. You're saying this is the way I am. Take it or leave it, and everybody goes, actually, I like that. And then that means if you've got an idea and you're enthusiastic about it, you take people with you, and that's a leadership. That's leading people.
Absolutely right. What it's doing is giving people a picture. The idea, the vision, and the enthusiasm is giving a picture of a future vision, a future hope that doesn't yet exist, and enabling people to believe that they might be able to get there as well. You may not absolutely be able to get there, but they may be able to catch what you're seeing. And so then from that point of view, Brian, that's absolutely true. It's so living that future vision that you enable people to think they could inhabit it as well. And that's why Napoleon said, a leader is a purveyor of hope. And if there was one characteristic that I think is key for a leader, it's that one of hope. A manager can provide reassurance, but it tends to be reassurance about what is. A leader provides hope for what is not yet. Does that make sense? A manager tends to make it so that you feel reassured about where you are and what's going on. But a leader enables you to catch a vision for and a hope for what is not yet. And that is a very kingdom message there. Because, think of Paul saying, this hope that I have not yet grasped, this future that I so believe in the reality of, the hope, the Christian hope is so tangible to Paul that it is real. And he says, think about the things of heaven, not the things of earth. I'm not inhabiting heaven yet, but it's as though we are. So what we're doing is that we're trying to live the reality of something that has not yet happened. And we have an expectation that it will. And so there is an expectation there as well. But the process of going from one to the other means to say that the leader is also embracing uncertainty. So a manager tends to try to bring certainty out of confusion. A manager, as a leader, says, let's cope with the uncertainty. Let's have the uncertainty. Otherwise, the journey won't be worth anything.
Mm-hmm.
And on the way, we're embracing the uncertain. We're living in a place of risk. We're having the confidence to step out into something. But the other thing that's key to being a leader is that they influence, they don't authorize. They translate the vision into reality and they bring courage for it. But the characteristic that's common to the really inspirational leaders is vulnerability. Can you think of some great leaders that have shown vulnerability?
Nelson Mandela.
Mandela, yeah, absolutely. Anybody else?
Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you're pretty well okay, Jonathan, when you just answer every question with Jesus.
Yeah. That was my plan, actually.
Yes, it was like, it sounds like a squirrel to me, but I know the answer is meant to be Jesus. So if you think about even somebody like Winston Churchill during the war, he did not say it wasn't going to be difficult.
Yeah.
He did talk about, the blood, sweat and tears. He did talk about the challenges. He didn't shy away from that. And the vulnerability was there. And even the best leaders I've seen in a business context are not necessarily the most charismatic, but they're the ones who can enable people to catch the vision, to share the journey, but also to share the pain of the journey and the risk, and be vulnerable themselves to know that they haven't got everything to get there, but together they can. Anything else about leaders that you notice about how they communicate?
I think they build teams.
Sorry, I missed that.
They need to be able to build a team. They need to have people who join them.
They need to be able to build a team. They need to be able to have different people with them. That's where the vision within precision comes from, because there'll be some diversity there. Anything else?
Leading on from what Paula said, a good leader delegates and makes sure that each one of those people within the team takes ownership, so that they will further and leverage whatever it is that leader is trying to get done, but it then spreads it.
Great. So that's bringing multiplication.
Yes.
So a leader brings multiplication. And so the interesting thing about that is that a manager tends to look after scarce resources. A leader tends to bring about multiplication.
Yes.
And so we'll come back to what Paula and Ellie were saying some more in next week when we start looking at values. So hold on to those things, stick them on your wall with a bit of blue tack, and we'll come back to it next week.
And the leader shows trust as well.
Trust.
When a leader delegates, a leader delegates trust also to the people they delegate to. They don't do someone else's they don't try and do the job they've delegated.
No, exactly. But actually, there's something different in there. We've also got some other elements in that, and I'll come back to that later on. But I'm just thinking about the characteristics of the leader. Go on, Andrew.
Yeah, it's knowing how to pick the right subordinates. It's picking the right people that help you.
Okay. I want to just pause all of you at the moment, because what's happening is that a lot of this conversation is about how to and about organization. And actually, it's not about how to, and it's not about organization, because when a leader starts, it's a complete mess. Think about Jesus and the 12 disciples, but think about the fact that he actually had more than 100 going around with him most of the time. He just had 12 close ones. They weren't delegated to organised. Sorry, John, you're wanting to say something.
Also, a good leader is not afraid of getting his or her hands dirty.
Yeah, not afraid to getting in a mess with it on the way as well. And that's where some vulnerability comes in. So let me just come back to this communication mechanism again. How do good leaders help other people catch what they're talking about?
They're inspirational, they're inspiring.
And by example.
Okay, and what kind of things might they describe to people? So yes, Meek, you're right, but there's more to it than that.
What it will look like, the goal, the fruit, what it will look like. They try and visualize it, give them a picture of this is where we're trying to get to.
Okay, so what we're after there is like that dream thing. I have a dream and it looks like this. A good leader tells stories. And what they tend to do is when you've got a time, this is leaders who bring transformation. Transformative leaders are evangelists rather than tacticians. They're not about the organizations. They're more about how do people get this inside. And that's the difference I was getting at earlier on when I was saying it's not so much about delegation. It's how many others around you get it inside. Because that's what starts to happen, is that it starts to become real to other people. And what happens is in uncertain times, especially in uncertain times, and my goodness, isn't this an appropriately uncertain time? Mm-hmm. We tell stories about an alternative future.
Right.
And just think about how that happens throughout the Bible. I had somebody say to me, and it probably goes back to what Brian was saying earlier on. They said, show Paul a grain of sand and he'll make you a beach. The multiplication is in there. I have seen this tiny thing and I can imagine it like this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask you, I just want to say that you say about a woman called Anne Mulcahy from Rank Xerox was really interesting. Xerox was bankrupt. It was falling apart at its seams, and she took over as managing director. And the company had lost all faith in itself, and the people didn't know where they were going. And they didn't see the purpose behind what they were doing. And what she did was she got some people to write an article 5 years in the future that described how the company was then, and published it and presented it to everybody so that they could capture this story of what the future looked like, so they could start inhabiting that space. And what she said is, I don't care what you do as long as it's all heading this way. And that's when she created this term called vision within precision, which brings transformation to people. And it's based upon storytelling. So I'm going to break you up and put you into the breakout groups again, if that's okay. And I'd like you to have a conversation about storytelling in the Bible and storytelling and how that works in relationship to Jesus and the way in which we see the parables in Matthew 13 or other stories in the Bible. But see how leadership and storytelling works. And if you look in Matthew 13, I'll just read you something. Matthew 13:34. Jesus always used stories and illustrations like these when speaking to the crowds. In fact, he never spoke to them without using parables. This fulfilled what God had spoken through the prophets when he said, I will speak to you in parables, and I will explain things hidden since the creation of the world. And he goes on to say, but those who are listening to my teaching, more understanding will be given. They will see and hear and understand. Listen and understand. Catch the vision, catch the stories, and see what's going on. And think about the other parable that Jesus gave. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed planted in a field. It's the smallest of all seeds, but becomes the largest of all garden plants. It grows into a tree and birds come and make their nests in it. Thinking about what we've been saying, just think about parables, think about stories, think about Jesus communicating. So I'm going to give you a little bit longer this time, and I hope you have a good chat. So anyway, welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a happy conversation about all of that. Did you find lots of examples? I take it that's a yes, Carol, is it?
Okay.
I'm just thinking we found lots to talk about, but whether they were the examples that we were meant to be talking about, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's okay, because it doesn't matter. Remember, this is vision within precision, so we're not going to be too worried about getting it right or not. The important thing is to get rid of the idea of trying to get it right. Just you know, we are so keen to get things right, and I think the big challenge with most Christian environments is that we are more worried about getting it right than we are just getting connection with God. So anyway, have a break for a few minutes. So I should have given everybody a comfort break earlier. I'm hopeless at this. Remind me. Comfort break time. Good opportunity to sneak off for a couple of minutes. Anybody that wants. Liz, are you Elizabeth? Yeah.
Yes.
Are you you're staying here for a moment?
I can, yeah.
Yeah. I just had a really strong sense last week, and I got the same thing this week, that the Holy Spirit is on your case at the moment, and that he's really wanting to equip you with a whole load of new gifts, and so just think about what's going to be there to equip you to get to where you need to. And I'm absolutely confident that maybe in the breakout group at the end of this, according to who you're with, ask them to pray for you to receive those gifts. So I don't know if there's anything you're longing for right now, but it's heading your way.
Thank you for that.
Good.
I don't know if you noticed I was crying before as well, because there were so many things you were saying that I felt like were speaking right to me. You know,
cool. Well, that's great.
I mean, who knows? They might have been speaking. Everyone might have been feeling that way, but I definitely felt that way. It's kind of, and in some ways, the kick in the butt I needed.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's good news. And but don't be. In a way, don't be surprised that the Holy Spirit's connecting with you like that, because part of it is that's the emotion you're feeling, is also the spiritual connection, and that's going to equip you and become an empowerment for you. And just don't be surprised that the world may not understand you entirely around you.
I've never been surprised by that before, so.
Well, that's why you may have noticed that all of the material I'm putting onto the Speakers of Life website. That's the Speakers of Life Essex website. You'll find the last week's talk is there. I'll post this one there as well. And I'm putting them all onto YouTube so that you can pick them up. But in addition to that, if anybody wants to come and join us at the Speakers of Life group as well, we're there for people who don't fit.
I've always said I like being a stranger. I always say I like being a stranger in a strange land.
Yeah, well, you can just come and enjoy some more strangers. I mean, that's part of what we're there for, is to enable people who don't fit to get together. And if any, I don't know if any of you have had a look at the book list that I sent through. But just have a peer at that and see if there's anything that appeals to you. Pretty well every one of those books has got different aspects of what we're doing in the evenings, and there's some great resources there to pick up on. So just have a peer, have a look at something, especially something that you think just sort of intrigues you, and then just pick it out and see what it's like. I think they're pretty well all in print apart from the Kawasaki one. I think, Elizabeth, you probably would enjoy the, I'm trying to remember what it's called now. It'll come to me in a moment.
Okay. Take it.
Where are we? Here we go. Yeah, Dave Schmelzer, not the religious type. Confessions of a Turncoat Atheist. Okay, I think we're all back. So I'd like to just share with you some tools to help you get started. And this is one that I think I'd like to share with you on the screen. So I'm going to put this up and share this desktop with you. And I think you can probably see something that says organization models now. And this is a way of thinking about what we're doing. Now, I have to warn you again that some of this will you could find quite annoying, and if you're an accountant, you'll hate me. But this is a way of thinking about how to get organizations going. And just to illustrate the point that this is the process that I've used to start building the last 3 businesses that I've been involved in building. And so it has been tried and tested in some quite demanding circumstances, and some of them have become quite big. So I'm going to give you some ideas about different types of organizations and the model that's used for them. And I'm sure you'll all be familiar with this one, because this is the kind of machine model. We tend to treat something as a machine. We tend to think of it as being structured with key objectives, targets, KPIs. That's key performance indicators. We're often thinking about input and output. We're talking about where our focus is going to be, how to be really intentional about stuff. Milestones is often top down, and it's got quite rigid edges. And actually, those are the kind of things we tend to talk about when we're having to repair the roof on the church, or trying to organize how to do a building project. Quite often we need it to be very organized, and not surprisingly, but actually the design for the building doesn't really fit with that kind of approach. It's great if you're running a factory, but not brilliant if you're selling stuff. So as a result of that, quite a lot of organizations that are more people-based have moved away from that kind of model, and they've used to something that's known as an organic model. And there's a little picture there sort of showing the change of shape. And in an organic model, they tend to start using alternative words, which are much more like you'd expect in the natural world. They tend to be talking about things like migration, and they're talking about creating the right environment for something to grow, feeding and nurturing, allowing stuff to grow and branches to develop, and then cutting off the ones that are not bearing fruit, and pruning things, and all those kind of nice words. And what we often find with that is you can have little groups with diverse objectives. They might all be part of a common goal, and it's structured in groups, structured in little environments which we can feed and nourish. And we can see things developing in a more relational way. And it tends to have porous edges. It tends to be able to expand into the environment around it a bit more. Does anybody recognize that in any way?
Like a church?
Is that a church, do you think?
Oh, it could be.
Could be. It could be.
Should be, yes. Probably.
Could be, and it should be. Yeah. Any other thoughts about those two different models? Which one fits the manager and which one fits the leader?
The right-hand one. Sorry, the organic one.
is more like a leader.
It's the leader, yes.
Yeah. And the machine one is more like a kind of managed structure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which ones do accountants like?
Oh, the left-hand one.
We love structure.
Yeah. Yeah, because you can measure everything. You keep measuring everything, you measure everything, and then you just see how things have changed and things are moving on. It's quite a lot more difficult to do that with an organic model. But interestingly enough, the guy who taught me some of this stuff was the guy we spoke about last week, this guy Albert Zandvoort, who had just gone into Lufthansa. And Lufthansa is an airline. Now, which one do you think would work best for an airline? Bearing in mind that, it schedules, fine times.
You would have thought it was a machine one, but it obviously isn't.
Yeah.
Of course, the question is set up in such a way that the answer is obvious, even though you wouldn't think so. Exactly right.
Depends on what. I mean, it depends on which aspect of Lufthansa you're looking at, doesn't it?
Absolutely right. So Lufthansa was an airline. I mean, it's all about getting people onto things that work to a schedule, and they get off the other end, and there's parcels and everything else is the same thing. In actual fact, it was going bankrupt, and he reorganized it into an organic model, because what was happening was that they were trying to, being a good German airline, just think it's a German airline. It isn't just any other airline. It's a German airline who are very, very good at organization,
Mm-hmm.
And the problem they got was they couldn't write processes fast enough for what happened in real life, because they wanted a process for everything and it didn't really work. And so actually by reorganizing it as an organic model and creating teams, it became much more flexible. It had porous edges. It could change and adapt, and it could respond without having to have everything nailed down all the time. So you're right, Hugh, some bits of it need to be like a machine. And actually, the key thing that needs to be like a machine in that model is the plane, because it is a machine. You need machines to be machines, but you need the other bits to be relational. And actually, the interesting thing about the way the world is changing now is that the machines are becoming more relational. And some of the machines are more relational than us. So it starts making you think about actually what kind of world, what might that look like?
Yeah.
So if we move on now, there's a third model, and the third model is the one that really accountants absolutely hate. This is called unfolding story. And this is, just like we were talking about earlier on, about telling stories. It's about having a very fluid structure. And it's about enabling people to catch the idea of the vision, not so that you can tell them what to do or really organize them, but enable it to come so much inside that they buy in and start telling the stories to each other. In fact, the whole thing becomes a story. And the key thing about it is that it has that phrase in there, just start. You begin, but you begin by telling the story to others. And as they get it, you enable them to express it their way. Now, the first time I ever used this was not in a kind of very relational way. It was with a bunch of engineers in Scotland who were very structured in what they were doing. And we were trying to work out how to do something that actually the other engineers in the company had said was impossible. So we had a little skunk works. I've always ended up being in the bit of the business that everybody thinks is bonkers. Liz, the one that everybody says, what are you doing over there? You're mad. And what happened was that in their spare time, we started to come up with this idea about what this future could look like. And it was about producing a completely new way of communicating to equipment. In fact, Brian, I have to say, it was the company that you guys have just been involved in buying. And it was created by this crazy idea. And actually, we just started seeing if we could build it. We did not have, believe it or not, for a bunch of engineers, we had no specification. You simply had it in each person's heart about what this vision was. And what was interesting about it was that the way you do that is you say, in amongst our group, we believe that we probably have the gifts, the skills, the capability to get where this vision is. We may not have them, but right now we probably have. And by mutually supporting it, mutually owning it, we may just get there. And what always happens, though, at the beginning of something is that there'll always be someone who says, but if you do that, this problem will occur and it will go wrong. Is that common experience amongst people?
The doom speak.
Yeah. And amongst a bunch of engineers, you always have a few. And the answer to that is you ignore them.
Okay.
You just say, we're going to start, and you keep going, because the problem that they say you're going to have, you may or may not experience. So you start and you keep going until you hit that problem.
Yeah.
So what it becomes is it becomes a vision that's shared in a very imprecise way with a whole group of people. And what was really strange is that, unlike all the other projects I'd led, I didn't seem to need to have lots of meetings with these people. And what was also very surprising was after 2 or 3 times we got together, a very dyed-in-the-wool, dour Scottish engineer turned around and said, I don't really get this, and I can't be able to do the accent, so forgive me. I don't get this, but I think we might have reached chapter 2. Because he had a sense that we come to the end of something and we were beginning something else. And it became a way of expressing things to people. And what happens is you get this idea of heading off on a journey. And where the leader is and where the vision keeper is, that they're down there ahead of you saying, come on, it's fine. Because as far as they can see, they can see the next bit to go. And they're holding in their minds the vision of where to get to. Now, if you think about that in the Christian terms, when you think about the purposes that Jesus has, just notice, if you look at a gospel after we've had this, as part of your homework, go and have a look at a gospel and start noticing how purposeful Jesus was about the next steps. He was keeping in mind the overall big vision. And you can see, do you remember that he was holding his true humanity here because he'd let go, he'd put aside all of his divine privileges. And so you can see that he was exploring ahead and keeping in mind the overall vision, but notice the purposes on the way, the individual stages that it goes through. And you can see that the story is unfolding, not only in the disciples' minds, who are clueless most of the time, but in the mind, almost in Jesus himself. You can see how that's developing. So have a look and see what you spot. But the interesting thing about this is that as you start to think about going on a journey and imagine yourself climbing a mountain, I had some illustrations here, and I won't bore you with them because it's about us going. Oh, well, I will bore you with one of them actually, because it's kind of fun because it illustrates the point, and then we'll go off and we'll do some praying for each other. We were staying in Austria near this mountain, Kate and I, and it was over 8,000 feet, and I had this kind of idea that we could climb it. And I don't know if any of you have done that kind of walking, but you know, you tend to sort of start off. And actually, I didn't tell Kate that I was hoping to get to the top. because there was a lot of snow up there. But what we did was we just started, and it was okay for the first bit. And you come to a stage where you think you're going to be comfortable in a nice place, but you can still keep noticing where you think the top is. I thought that was the top on the way, but it wasn't.
Mm.
And like a lot of these things, you come to different areas of it where you get a different view and it feels very comfortable. And then you come to some bits that you weren't quite expecting. And they were a lot bigger than you imagined and harder to get over than you thought of. But you may not have been stopped by the thing that everybody said was going to stop you on the way. You just did the next bit, and then the next bit, then another bit. And then you find that you can actually get over the snow. And then you can see the real summit, but it's still a long way off. And even then, you've got some stuff that you're not quite sure how you're going to get over, but you keep on going. And then the view changes quite dramatically. And actually, when you get to the point when you think you've arrived, you still haven't quite got there. And then you do, and the top doesn't look quite as snowy as you thought it was going to be. And there is the snow up there. And I was feeling terrified because the drop over that edge was sheer and it was huge. And you suddenly realize that when you get there, it ain't quite what you expected. And you can often see a much longer way. And you can often think, my goodness, there's more to go. But you've got far further than you ever imagined was possible. And what's going on with all of this is that we're reaching out always for the something more than. We're seeing the vision, but we're starting now. Because I've seen far too many people who get that vision, that purpose, that life in their hearts. And they either begin and then get stuck. They sometimes get to first base, but it's the purpose rather than the overall goal. But most of them never start at all. And that's desperate. Because and the part of the reason for that is that our culture around us is actually that of a kind of management culture rather than the aspirational leadership culture. So part of what we're doing with this Lent course is about seeing if we can change the culture and enable somebody to start and to go for the thing that they've dreamt of but think is impossible. And part of the way that's going to happen is because around you now are a bunch of people who believe you can do it. And the reason we believe that is because Jesus believes in you. And Jesus believes you can do it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have given you that passion, that idea in your mind already. That is the extraordinary privilege of joining a leader on the journey. So, to finish off this evening, I'm going to ask you to go back into your breakout groups again. And now, pray with each other. To pray that you will be able to catch some of this and that you will feel encouraged and blessed and equipped. Pray for each other in outrageous ways tonight. And if you feel like it, share with each other. If you notice somebody in your group has got a passion for something, then just get behind them, enable them, and connect them with someone here who can help them. But don't let it go away. And we'll keep unpacking that as each week goes by. Kate.
I just want to say, if there's anyone who is not comfortable praying out loud, then just a simple prayer of, Lord, please bless this person is a really great prayer. And an even better prayer is, your kingdom come, your will be done. So I don't want anyone to feel under pressure or uncomfortable.
Thank you, Kate. That's really helpful. And take the risk of having a go. You're amongst friends. So bless you with that. Do you want to stay in the same groups for this bit? Or shall I?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, does everybody feel comfortable to do that?
Mm.
Yeah, okay. Okay, well, I'll send you off to your breakout groups again. And then we'll all just come back together just for a final prayer in 10 minutes. Okay?
Mm.
Well, welcome back, everybody. So just for your homework this week, I'd like you to think about how you would express your vision, your passion as a story. You can tell it as a parable, if you like. You could do something where you actually wrote an article about it as though it was written 5 years in the future, looking back and describing what's gone on, or even describing how it is 5 years' time.
Mm-hmm.
You may want to, if you're arty, you may even want to do a drawing or a picture of it. But anyway, do whatever you think is appropriate, but
Okay.
do something creative. Do it as though it's a story and be able to tell it to people around you. Because the crazy thing about it is you start telling it as a story, you'll find yourself inhabiting the story as well.
Mm.
And that's the really good fun thing about stories, is people love stories. Tell stories. So see if you can start telling this as a story. And don't worry about whether it's practical. And don't worry about the challenges that might be experienced. And then if you can, and if you've got time, try telling the story to somebody that you know who may not have heard it before. And then see how that feels. So engage your emotions, engage your imagination, as well as your critical thinking patterns, and see where that takes you. So thank you, everybody, for engaging as brilliantly as you do. I would love us to be able to meet together, because I'm sure that if we were able to do that, it would spark off all kinds of new conversations and relationships and activity. But we are doing well as we are. So let's use all that we've got in front of us, because what it's doing is it's enabling us to reach together across distances that we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. So let's just pray. And Lord, I just thank you for this brilliant bunch of people. Thank you that I just see your spirit working in hearts, minds, lives. And thank you that you're already prompting, transforming leaders to bring transformation where they are. Kingdom transformation come in these communities, in these places that we touch and inhabit and connect with. Come and bring transformation to churches. Come and bring transformation to lives and individuals. Come and inspire us with a picture of how things can be, and help us to catch your vision, to catch your purpose, and to be able to see some of that become a reality around us. Lord, thank you for that. Open our hearts and minds this week, and may you fill us with a sense of joy and hope as we experience your presence. Amen.
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 So have fun with that. I'm looking forward to seeing the kind of pictures, visions you might come up with next week. You may even have a story to tell about your own church or your own organization you're part of already. And that might be interesting, because it might just be the kind of thing you can tell people. So have fun with that. Lovely to see you. If anybody's got any questions, or they're churned up about something, or they don't know what to do about it, you can always drop me an email. There's a telephone number on the mails I've sent you. And by the way, each week will be a new Zoom identity. And there's a reason. Yeah, it's okay, Ellie, you got there in the end. And the reason for doing that is that it helps us make sure that it remains this group and that we don't lose it and lose our security. Thank you, everybody. Brilliant to see you. Keep being wonderful.
Likewise.
Thanks.